Good morning, everybody. My name's Sam Bowen, and I'm a Museum Development Officer for Kent and Medway in the South East. Thanks so much for joining us today, and I know you're joining us from all over, not just the South East, which is really wonderful. It's one of the huge benefits to doing our online training now, which we found, so that's great. Today, we're going to be doing our second of the series of online training sessions for accessibility, and today is digital access and inclusion for visitors. And in a moment, I will introduce you to Morris from Disability Collaborative Network and Sarah Simcoe from Embed. We're really great to be able to work in partnership with you guys because you know, you are the experts in this field, and it's definitely something we need to look at. It's important because post-lockdown, not everybody is going to necessarily be able to or come back to visit for quite a while. My family included, actually, because my daughter's disabled and we're still shielding. So you still want to be able to engage with people. But also how you engage in your digital content is really important that it's accessible, not just for now in this period in the next few months, but actually going forward for always. You always want your website information to be as accessible as possible, because that is the first place that people look to plan to see if they're going to come and visit you in the physical. So hopefully today's training, I know you'll get an awful lot from it. There will be an awful lot that Becky's looking through and Sarah's talking about, and we will be uploading the slides and all the chat that goes on as well, and any notes onto our data. So if you feel that you haven't been able to write notes quickly enough, don't worry. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you could please mute your mics, that will be in the top right. You should be able to find where to do that. And if you want to ask questions throughout, please feel free to do so through the chat forum. So there'll be, if you look at the chat, you can just type in your question, and then either Sarah or Becky, depending on who's not talking at the time, will track those and we'll answer them throughout. And we'll also give a few minutes at the end for somebody who, for people who want to ask questions audibly. So you'll just raise your hand at the end, but when we come to that bit. So just like as we've discussed before, the notes will be available on our website later. We haven't booked in any, it's 90 minutes approximately. We haven't actually booked in any downtime. So if you do need to go make yourself a cup of tea, go for a wee break or whatever, that's fine. You can leave and then Juliet can let you back in again. So please don't worry about that. And I think that's probably all I've got to say about introducing it. Thanks for coming, and I'll hand you over to Becky.
Hi everybody. As you know, I have my coffee and my Haribo snacks at the ready. Let me just get the slides up for you and then we'll be ready to go. There we are. So literally before we all get going, welcome to DCN's and Embed's webinar today about digital access and inclusion for your visitors and producing content. We're going to be covering quite a lot today, so don't worry about literally, as Sam was saying, making notes or anything like that. This is more about sort of seeing what you've got in terms of ideas in your heads, and also in terms of planting seeds about joining up the dots and what you already may be doing. But before we get going, we're going to introduce ourselves. So I'm Becky Morris, I'm the director of DCN, and we work for inclusive practice in the service provision and working practice and workforce in museums and heritage. I'm very happy to say that DCN and the Disability Collaborative Network, CIC, and Embed have collaborated to create a unique cross-sector partnership to support the thousands of diverse museums and heritage organisations on their inclusion journey. This is underpinned by cross-sector skills and learning from experienced experts that work with museum collections, narratives, and their additional assets, which is you, your volunteers, and also your visitors. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sarah, who is the co-founder of Embed, and also we work together in terms of inclusive practice delivery. So off you go, Sarah.
Thanks, Becky. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Sarah Simcoe. I'm the Director of DMS Wirral Limited. I work with and on behalf of companies such as Purple and ENEI and those really great organisations focused on diversity and inclusion. I'm also the creator and founder, as Becky mentioned, of Embed. Becky mentioned it's a cross-sector collaboration, that the whole intent and purpose of Embed is to bring together in excess of around 30 years experience across a number of consultants now that form that consortium for me. And within there, we have access to knowledge and experience around the lived experience. And our ethos and our core values include tapping into that voice of the lived experience, into a principle of collaboration. We also ensure that we focus on intersectionality throughout all that we do. And we also make sure that anything we offer and support is cost accessible, which is really important to a lot of sectors and organisations out there. So we really try to be a constructive, critical friend to any organisation, regardless of size or shape or budget constraints. So delighted to join another one of these webinars. I think there's some really great collaborative conversations going on right now. And I'm really interested to see some of the chat that we have coming through. So thanks, Becky.
Ah, brilliant. Yes, this is it. I mean, for the heritage sector in particular, we're here to support all of you in terms of developing business skills whilst recovering from the lockdown, and also building your own offer in respect to reopening as well. So you may have noticed on Twitter recently, we've released the Embed Reopening Recommendations Support Service, which is a key piece of support for you in terms of what you need to do to consider inclusive practice, to ensure and identify that what you're doing isn't going to create barriers for disabled and neurodivergent people, but also in terms of your overall offer as well. So do have a look at that, and I'll make sure that everybody gets the link to that at the end of the webinar. Right, so this is what we're going to do today. So in terms of what we're going to do, the key thing is that within digital inclusion, the value of it reflects the engagement and reputation of the museum and the sector in how it produces content which reaches out and removes barriers for people to engage with the information and services of the museum, no matter size or stakeholders. The key thing is building in digital inclusion throughout the whole organisation benefits the business in your operation, but also in your reputation, to create and widen engagement and participation of services. But, and this is the big but at the moment, is that the recent stats from Indigo that were released just, I believe, last week, state that 77% of disabled people feel vulnerable to COVID-19. And therefore, digital inclusion and identifying barriers as part of your overall offer will prepare you, in particular, your organisation, for being prepared for your profile. And in the case of localised lockdown, and supporting your customers' needs. So we're very much about building on your capacity, actually increasing your capacity and increasing your resources by providing digital inclusion from the offset, but being able to have that there. So then if something happens, you can actually navigate around that change without feeling as though you've got to lay the track as the trains come in. The key thing is as well, is that whenever you do a digital project, it needs to be on an equal collaborative partnership between disabled and neurodivergent people. So that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism spectrum condition, etc. And also making sure that this also creates an opportunity for all of your staff to be involved, because all of them will have their own personalized networks and knowledge. But inclusion doesn't mean disabled people, and it's all of us, and particularly our changing needs ourselves and also within our society. So it can be anything from roadworks to that causes extra time getting into town. It can be losing your glasses or needing to have the lenses replaced and you can't because you're shielding. It's also things like muscle control or conditions like arthritis, which may mean holding a stylus or a tablet for a long time may be painful. We'll also be sharing recent research on digital exclusion during this pandemic and how you can support your audiences. And we'll also be looking at how to engage your work behaviours, which can support an inclusive user experience and workforce delivery to support you, particularly within your limited capacities and resources at this time. So what we don't want you to feel is overwhelmed, because it's not like that. It's not like that at all. It's more about taking a step back and thinking about what you want to do and how you're going to deliver it. But the key thing is that we're going to have a suite of how-tos and practical help, which is on the website. And also we're here for you. So we're here throughout the whole thing. If there's something after this that you want to talk to us about, we're here for you to do that. We're literally, whatever it is, just give us a call. And we're also here to support you in terms of your digital strategy, your inclusion offer, and also your business planning in the post-lockdown world. So, common barriers to digital inclusion for visitors. So, when it comes down to it, website accessibility often relates to how disabled people and everyone can find and engage with services and information. That is absolutely critical. What does your shop window look like? The website accessibility supports people to engage with services if they have a sensory, neurological, physical, or cognitive difference. But there are barriers to this in particular. So, for example, for the visitor, the lack of accessibility information on your website, or that the accessibility standard and considerations such as zoom function, background color are very difficult to find. So how easy is it to find the accessibility settings on your website? The content itself isn't user intuitive, so there are disruptions and limited opportunities to make purchases, book tickets, and make donations. The consideration hasn't been given on how long it takes, the design, and also the experience of the user. So one of the difficulties in relation to that is if you've got 101 things happening in the background and you want to book some tickets, but it takes too long, you may go to somewhere else and you may go to another provider or your competitor. If you're charging for membership services or subscription, is the content and information inclusive to reach out and reassure people with their changing needs so that profile is consistent throughout your digital offer? Also, in relation to that offer, not only will you find that your profile is not only consistent, but also you keep your customer. So if their needs change in any ways or means, you've got a situation where they are consistent to your offer. You're not going to lose them. Another thing you need to think about is the visitor will struggle to engage with any news or updates, including when you closed and also when you're reopened, but also the information that's available in relation to post-lockdown measures. So if you've changed anything in relation to your offer, you need to make sure it's on an inclusive platform to engage in wider participation, your existing audiences, but also in regards to your overall message. Think about that 77% and how they're going to be feeling confident and less anxious by going to your organisation if you've considered potentially their needs. A visitor will not be able to make online purchases and donations online. They won't engage with you about donating objects, inquiries, or bequests. Your offer may not fit their values, so why would they want to donate to you? The volunteering experiences and jobs will not be representational to society and communities due to lack of consideration of design and information content Recently, research based in the US has suggested that barriers to skills and access to tech will have to be overcome if there's going to be new job opportunities and economic growth from the frontline roles. But the transition is going to be a difficult one in respect to people who have low paid work and social and economic status. But as sectors move forward towards technology, it's important that your shop window moves towards digital inclusion to support your customers and visitors and representation in your workforce. So one of the key elements to that is common factors can include a lack of contrast on text to the background colour, things like lack of opportunity to increase the text size. The visuals are not representational, but also that the form, if there's any forms, to make sure they're not heavily formatted. It's a bugbear of mine. The audiences themselves as well would include people who are over 60, people with young families, and also adults with neurodiversity and disabilities. So the audience itself, the actual net itself is incredibly wide, and it's ensuring that those needs are actually adjustable, but also in terms of building in the knowledge to the organisation as well. The key other thing as well, and I see this a lot, it's the accreditation standards say that you need an accessibility statement, but it's actually on a non-accessible website. So if you're providing information about accessibility, but people can't actually engage with that information, you've got a bit of a problem. You've also got another element as well, and this is a real particular one for myself personally, is that people may perceive that the museum is not for them. So in terms of the impact on well-being, we know that 13.9 million disabled people in the UK, but 53% of disabled people feel lonely. And that's from Joe Cox's Commission on Loneliness. 77% of young disabled people feel lonely. So that's young people. 18% of learning disabled people feel alone. So therefore, outreach needs to be always inclusive to people, particularly how isolating they are at home, but also in terms of what is going on at the moment, in terms of anxiety, in terms of concern, also in relation to what's going on outside, the changing guidance. This will all build on that anxiety. But if you create a digital offer, like I say, it'll build on your profile, but also in terms of reaching out to those audiences as well, to reassure them that you are considering them in your offer. We also know from studies from SCIE that interventions through collaboration, understanding barriers, and creating flexible approaches to offers can be fun, are absolutely key. So here we go. Sorted. How are we doing, Sarah?
I think you're doing wonderfully, Becky.
Bless you, darling.
And it's a really great point, isn't it? Because when we look at any of those visitor locations, attractions, and I always hark back to something one of our clients had mentioned, and she said they have 8 museums and galleries that they look after. The website she's now treating as their 9th location. So when you consider it in that way, it starts getting you thinking about it being that initial first view into what's available within an organisation, how you get there, facilities, all of that great stuff that you've mentioned. But being able to access that digitally is so very important to the customer and visitor experience.
Definitely, and particularly now at the best of times. It should always happen anyway, but particularly now, you know, when it comes to particularly where the position of the sector is, and also in regards to preconceptions of what people think museums are. So the key thing is, though, whams if when we get it right. And the website accessibility benefits not only the business, it benefits the people, both the workforce and the visitors, the communities and society, because you are basically saying, look what we've done. We've considered people, we've considered our communities. These are the decisions we have made. This is the situation for which we've found ourselves. We've been able to navigate around all this change, and we've created good quality content that's inclusive to our audiences. And you've got that content for a long time. That's the key thing. It also affects businesses and museums at the core of all their activities and representation for people to engage with all of their services. So you've got more of a lead in to your organisation as well. So imagine it's like that, and there's sort of pieces of string, like a big mind map, to all of those groups, to audiences nationally, internationally, but also that delivery as well. Digital inclusion can also regain customer confidence by using technology to connect and develop relationships with museum visitors and customers. Museums and organisations can become proactive in understanding the needs of the audience and how these change. So that building upon the situation, not laying the track as the train's coming. So one of the examples that we've found is some friends of ours at Barclays, and it's extraordinary because they've created this bangle, and the bangle itself is contactless payment. And the idea is that you'll be wherever at the shops or anything, you don't have to touch anything, and you just hover the bangle over the scanner and you've paid for your goods. Now, the key thing is that it's brilliant for people like myself who have got dyspraxia, which is a motor coordination difficulty. So if you're in a rush, you don't want to throw your cards everywhere. It's for people with arthritis that may find that fine motor control difficult. But also in terms of it's available to all customers. So you don't have to be a member of Barclays or have your bank account at Barclays. You can still use it. And, you know, you've got to be honest, that makes Barclays look amazing. And the key thing is with that, they've been identified as a leader by reputation. They've developed innovative ideas and solutions through the changing needs of their customers. But also in terms of their profile, we're talking about it now. And it's that idea of your profile being raised through an innovative idea. Innovation does not mean high risk. It does not mean high cost, not all the time. It can be something as simple as a creative idea. And it's about sharing those ideas and that innovation to understand and create action in terms of those changing needs of our customers. We've also got places like NHS Northwest who have created digital ambassadors to support the needs of patients in ordering repeat prescriptions, cancelling appointments and consolidating information to support them in their day-to-day management of their health conditions. So the idea that they're developing opportunities for their patients that match their lifestyle. Like that. And I have that myself, and it's absolutely amazing. It takes 2 minutes. It's glorious. So what we know from digital inclusion is that it positively impacts on the purchasing opportunities by providing inclusive e-commerce. It raises your profile. It creates innovative ideas and actions that move as society moves forward. It becomes proactive in understanding the needs of the audience and the workforce. It creates a critical understanding on the development and changing needs of communication of communities and positions the museum at the heart of its locality. It increases the reputation of the museum as an inclusive organisation to visit and work for. But also, you're building on your knowledge. You're creating a tool bag of skills and knowledge. So you're not leaving it to one person or one department. It's an organisational buy-in in respect to innovative solutions. And this in turn can become creative in problem-solving issues by offering a key solution. It's about creating better working practice to support the communal knowledge within that organisation and sharing ideas for inclusion and the production to represent society. So yes, it's a key thing, and it's basically reflecting on everything that we've seen from this dreadful pandemic so far, is all relating to the idea of this flexibility within the workforce and how it can affect and support the user experience. So it works both ways in relation to the workforce and the user experience, but also in terms of the buy-in from the workforce themselves. So it's about your frontline staff through to your boss, which we'll come on to in a sec. But what happens if you don't do that? Yes. The problem is that you've got a recognised gap in digital participation of disabled and people of colour, and people from lower social and economic groups that participate in digital culture. And we know this from the Culture is Digital Progress Report of 2019. But inclusion needs to be at the core of every museum, strategy, plan and project to recognise and act on these barriers to participation within their communities. But what we know now is that to support visitors and customers in understanding their barriers in their day-to-day experience needs, it has to be intersectional. It can't be hierarchical, nor can it be holistic in terms of those solutions. It has to be based on individual needs. That doesn't mean you have to have a conversation with every single visitor that comes in, but what you can do is build upon that knowledge and actually say, yes, we've got this, yes, we've got that. No, we haven't got this, and we need to look at that as a priority, and being able to build on it and become action-based. Another thing is that we know that during this pandemic, people have been disproportionately disadvantaged because of low social and economic status, people of colour, people in frontline jobs, people who are disabled have really struggled disproportionately due to this pandemic. And the key thing is with that is that is, at the moment, there's no let up. And it's about enabling a situation where the museum itself can become proactive in regards to supporting people, recognising where those barriers are in respect to their offer, but also where their situation is in terms of collaboration with partnerships with agencies and organisations, but also enabling a situation where the museum itself can actually develop support and positive work in relation to this. Really interesting. I don't know if people saw this over the weekend, where there was a review about a recent museum that had just reopened, and it was like, it's great to see the paintings. And I was like, but what happens if you're blind? What happens if you're partially sighted? Where does that leave you? Just by saying that says a great deal. So it's really important that intersectional inclusion is, if it's not seen to be an integral part of the organisation, you will not attract the customers or the visitors to the site. But another thing as well, and that is sometimes, particularly if we're looking at funding streams, workloads, people have been furloughed, that online content can appear rushed and not part of an overall organisational plan. So the content itself doesn't highlight the purchasing opportunities or donation opportunities or highlighting key services to attract and keep that audience like that. Because this is what we're doing, aren't we? When it comes to our websites, like, come to us. But at the same time, if you're negotiating that relationship, you may not have that situation occur. But also, if you have a lack of inclusive practice, it shows limited awareness and therefore an assumed need, and you don't need that right now. you also need to think about the risk in terms of a limited attraction of people whose needs are not addressed. So if content is developed by a third-party consultant who doesn't integrate the skills into the organisation, so project's done, there you go, but it's not accessible. Therefore, those skills within the organisation are not embedded. So that's a key consideration as well. There's also a lack of management and leadership buy-in due to barriers and limited understanding of inclusion to the organisational strategy. Change is a very slow process to engage. Again, recent research suggests that how reaction to change and strategy will be key in developing a mission-critical processes in a post-lockdown world. Strategy, planning, make sure your staff are not burnt out, ensure that there is a strategy where people can get involved, share the knowledge, build on your capacity, build on your resources. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So, digital inclusion. This is a really, really key one. As we were saying earlier, during the lockdown period, the social inequalities that people have faced have been amplified during this whole lockdown process. So we know in 2018, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation said that 5.3 million adults in the UK were not internet users. But by not using the internet, digital exclusion has shown not to be generationally linked. The affordability of the internet, skills in how to do that, and technology in terms of purchasing power are linked to poverty and literacy. Studies at Cambridge University has shown the impact of low paid work to income to the household. So as you can see from the slides here, if you have an income of £6,000 to £10,000 in your earnings, 51% of those households will not have internet access. And over £40,000 income, 99% of households will have access. Absolutely extraordinary. Often, and one of the key things, you may have seen it on the news recently, that technology needs to be shared. And this in turn affects connection to friends, family, online deliveries for food, homeschooling, and also support networks. So one thing that we do know is that poverty is linked to grades, which 25% have achieved 9 to 5 in GCSE maths and English in 2019, and therefore it's a circle. So the key thing is with that is that I've worked with adults, I've done this for 10 years, and I work with organisations in relation to adult literacy. And one of the key elements right now is that because a lot of the kids are being homeschooled, if there are reading issues within that family unit, and you're not only going to have a difficulty in terms of low paid jobs, very manual type work, but also in terms of adult literacy themselves. People won't tell you if they've got difficulties with their reading because they're so embarrassed. But also if they've got a neurodiversity profile that needs support, you have to pay for that privately. So you're already, there is a barrier there. So I'll come on to what we can do about that in just a second. So the key thing is with this, so what can we do about it? And the key thing is with this is that there are agencies and charities right now who are supporting families there, which I will share with the guys after this webinar. They're the WE charity, the Computer Technology Assistance Corps, great name, and the United Way UK. And these are charities and agencies that will take old technology and actually share it with groups and people like that. they'll often have collection points, and also in terms of what they're specifically looking for. There's also strategies for the museum as well, in terms of information, how-tos to support people, particularly if they have difficulty with digital confidence as well. And also creating easy read documents and visual based information for people with literacy difficulties. So don't rely so much on words, but more on expression in terms of images. Right. Okay, Sarah, we're getting to the greatest resource. I know people have often said it's the collections, but I think it's the
People.
staff and the people.
People.
Exactly. People, exactly. The key thing is that it's about building connections across all of your teams with clear key purpose. So what do we mean by that? So the idea is that if you create connection in your teams and a sense of community, people feel able to share, and people feel able to communicate and share their ideas, and how your teams themselves can actually synchronize with change, and also in terms of impacts on your own organization. I know, Sarah, you've done so much in relation to this. Would you like to add anything so far while I grab a sweet?
Wow, you make me jealous by eating a Haribo. Yeah, in all of the years I've been working in this space, and for those that don't know me, my background is transformation, but alongside responsible business, and within there includes diversity and inclusion. In all the years that I've had a toolkit bag of stuff that works really well, the one thing that's always afforded the greatest level of outcome, of positive outcome, is directly tapping into your people. So whether that's the voice of the lived experience, or whether that's your staff, it's creating that connection in the community that allows people to inform and influence what the experience is going to be like, what the policies are going to be like, what the processes are going to be like, because each of us have an individual need, each of us have an individual perspective, all of which, when you bring that together and you use that in a connected and collaborative way, really allows you to identify great actions, proactive, positive actions to take forward, but also really motivate your team and gets them feeling like they're also part of bringing about more change. And I think right now where we find ourselves is tragic, that it's a pandemic that's teaching us some lessons, but lessons we are being taught nevertheless. Those lessons are, when we come together, when we do tap into that voice of the lived experience, we're really seeing amazing things happening across sectors. And I, as somebody who more new to working with this sector over the last couple of years, I see that more now, and I think I also see the evidence of the positive change that are happening across some of the organisations. The fact that we're all on this webinar today shouts out about connecting into people.
Mm-hmm. Huge. Absolutely. Thanks, Sarah, because it's so key, because in terms of cross sectors, this is such a key element, and being able to share. And also, beautiful thing about collaboration right now, particularly within the cultural sector, is that we're all talking to each other. So I'm in a group called We Shall Not Be Removed, which is been set up for the cultural sector itself. And what's happening is that we're all talking to each other about how the pandemic has affected our venues, but also in terms of where we're similar and where we're different. And it just gives that key learning experience, but also taking it forward. And we're more better and more, there's more opportunities if we work together and amplify our voices. Absolutely. Than if we actually sort of work alone.
Absolutely. And a lot of the feedback that we're receiving now from organisations that we're working with, some of them are sculpture exhibitions that are trying to do that digitally. Some of them are museums that are trying to create a more digitally savvy experience when somebody arrives on site that reinforces safety around COVID. What we're seeing because of that collaboration is this real great moment of innovation. And for me, exploring those conversations further outside of this webinar is what I encourage people to do. Be kind to yourselves along the way, but encouraging people to continue to collaborate and come up with these really amazing ideas that are going to really evolve and grow the sector over time is what we absolutely want, right?
For me, it's that whole process as well, that the idea itself, there'll be some people that think might be a bit expensive, or oh, I don't know if we've got the time to do that. But when you actually break that idea down, it actually is doable. It's more of a case of joining up the dots. And if you don't have the time and the capacity, think about who is there, other people you can have involved. Think about how you can develop that so it's not all happening at once. Is there a way forward? Actually break it down so it's more manageable, so you're not falling back on that, oh, I haven't got many people. Because we've known organizations that have developed change processes in relation to digital exclusion of their communities at the moment, and there's 2 of them. And you're like, what? And there's 2 of them. And you're thinking, yeah, we've done this, we've done that. And you're like, my God, that's extraordinary. So think about that process as well. So the key thing is that if we don't do that, to be honest, hand on heart, we've all been there. If you have a situation where you don't feel that you're able to share your ideas, are you actually going to share them? So you feel disengaged, you'll start to look elsewhere. And there's a recent report from People Insight that says 71% of employees will actually look for other jobs and go. So you're going to lose that talent, whether it be a volunteer or paid member of staff, no matter how your setup is. But also your community offer, your risk is that your community offer will mean that you're out of sync potentially. And that's a big risk, and you don't need that, because you're going to have to put yourselves in synchronization, particularly within the pandemic. So think about how you can share those ideas, even if it's just a box of post-it notes or a pen and a large piece of paper with tea and cake. Get those creative ideas whirring forward, but also in terms of have an ideas folder on the staff intranet, anything like that, and empower them to take it forward. In the end, and this is a key thing as well, and this kind of sums up where we're coming from, in that from the end, you've got your employees at the bottom there, and the leadership. The employees need to listen to the management need to go to the leadership, but also the leadership needs to listen to the management, and the management needs to listen to the employees. And the idea is that it's about moving up and then moving down. So those influences, particularly within your frontline staff, they need to influence the leadership, and the leadership needs to be influenced by the management and the employees. That is absolutely critical. But also, it's a great way, particularly right now, if there's anything that happens, if something's not working, you can direct that through your communication channels and make sure that they're open as well. And this all relates to that digital inclusion offer, because if you're missing a key piece of information on your website, say somebody calls in relation to access, and it's one of 5 inquiries you've had in relation to your access. So size of your toilets, feed it up to your management in terms of your website, but also in terms of your leadership, if there needs to be any maintenance budget put aside in regards to those toilets, maybe you need some more, things like that. And what can we learn from each other? As Sarah was saying, there's a great deal of opportunity to listen more in developing opportunities to understanding the day-to-day experience. And also within inclusive leadership, it supports and emphasizes, if I can say it, for colleagues and visitors who feel marginalized for a whole range of reasons. So if you're feeling a bit concerned about sharing your story, an inclusive leader will make you feel comfortable in relation to sharing your story if you want to. They may look at setting up networks, employee networks in delivery. They may have things like a passport scheme. So you're not feeling in any way under pressure. But the most important thing for a competitive sector such as this, you are not feeling that you need to self-advocate. But also you'll have all this shared knowledge and this day-to-day experience that would actually really support your organization, and you will feel like a valid member of your organization as well. So the organization benefits, the employee benefits, the organization, it changes and evolves with those changing needs. It builds on the capacity and it builds on the resources, and that can be seen through that shop window of your website as well. The key thing is as well, like we were saying earlier, it's about innovative ideas within the organisation that involves all departments in producing inclusive content. So if you've got somebody who's put up their entire life history about why they collect lawnmowers, as you do, in the end, and they've done it all on Times New Roman size 12 with no pics, that in itself is going to cause a problem. So that in turn, if you've heard that, if your front of house team have heard that, how are you going to change it? So being able to create that communication from front of house through to your leadership. And also, is there opportunities within your communities and locality to create ambassadors to support your profile raising, and in terms of your local champions? That in itself will help you in terms of potential revenue generation, but also in terms of your reputation, and also to your stakeholders, particularly if your local authority. Another thing as well is that day-to-day experience in terms of digital inclusion is diverse. It's also things about having that conversation and capturing that diversity within that day-to-day experience. So for somebody like myself, I get incredibly anxious traveling somewhere new, primarily because I've got no sense of direction at all. My working memory, because I'm neurodivergent for dyspraxia, means that I have to have a visual map. But I'm also shielding. So what has the museum got to make me feel safe? And how do I get there without getting lost? So what we can also do in terms of our collaborative partnerships is consider things such as Neatbox's Welcome app, which is supportive of disabled and neurodivergent people, people with learning disabilities. As they enter the museum, they are able to book on the system to say that they're coming, to say when they're arriving, and also any reasonable adjustments that they need. And also there is an awareness raising tool in respect to that piece of software. So when it comes to awareness, you're able to understand key considerations that you may have already forgotten as part of your awareness training. You know, you can't remember everything, but it'll have key reminders of what that tool can do, but also key reminders of the key difficulties that person may have and what you may need to do or consider talking to them in relation to all of this. And also that those reasonable adjustments, like I say, we are still in a society where there is a literacy issue. We've also got the situation within intersectionality with audiences and non-users in respect to museums, and that has been particularly highlighted in the pandemic in regards to how people have been disproportionately affected. So we mustn't, the reasonable adjustments have to be diverse and intersectional as part of this. Right. How are we doing, Sarah?
Doing good. We're doing good. I saw a demo of Neatbox, and the other great thing that it allows you to do is take feedback. So when we talk about listening to people, that also goes into listening to the visitors, right? So it had this really great function where they can also give you feedback that you can take away. and action. And when you start thinking about digital inclusion in that regard, when you start thinking about all of the areas for consideration of digital inclusion, kind of includes web, so the internet, your internal sites, but then it also includes your facilities. It includes your offering, your collections. It includes how you support one another. And when you have access to these really simple apps like Neatbox Welcome app, I think it makes that process of change across those core areas of digital inclusion a lot easier than it would have been previously. So yeah, really great app for people to explore.
Yeah, it's really useful. There is some, it's in our new recommendations guidance.
It is.
And also there's a YouTube link to it as well to show you how it works, like that. So indeed. So you've got a digital project and you've got some ideas, but you're not sure about the accessibility side of things. So 4 principles of accessibility. First one is perceivable. The information must be presented in a way that users can understand. So make sure that there's clarity and also that it's easy to use. It's got to be operable. The technology and the user interface shouldn't ask the user to do something they cannot do. So think of the iPhone. You don't see a big instruction booklet with your iPhone or your tablet. It pretty much, you know what you need to do. It's user intuitive. It's understandable. So can the users understand the information as well as the interface? So the interface is the actual, when you're on your tablet, it'll have all the different apps on it like that. That's the user interface. The information is what you need to do when you open it up, your app or your piece of information on your website. And is it robust? So can the technology be used as technology advances? So you know how it is. If you have a situation with WordPress and WordPress updates, or somebody's using a particularly old mobile or a previous generation mobile, will it still work? Will those functions still work on that previous generation mobile? This is the key about getting everybody all in together, because you've all got different mobiles. Some of them will be older than others. There will be people that have iPads and people have Android tablets. So if you have a collective within your team, that in itself will be extremely useful to you in terms of your digital offer, but also in terms of key functions. So making sure that when you look at the information on a tablet, that it's all self-contained, like that. So another key thing is collaboration. So with regards to collaboration, it will be things like there's underlying causes of digital inclusion that can be associated to partnership collaboration within communities and nationally. So the idea is about, one of the big ones was sensing culture, and looking at that in respect to what the requirements was. It was done by RNIB and other associated partners. And the idea was that it was to create tours for people who are partially sighted and blind. And the key thing is about sensing culture was there was some key moments of goodness there that involved 3D printing with fridge condenser units, as you do, in collaboration with the local university. There was an app function, and also that they tested the living daylights out of it as well with key audiences to enable that it was inclusive as it could be, like that. There's also another situation as well, is that it influences good practice in regards to the sector and show it off, you know, like that. There's also the idea that you are attracting non-audiences. You're challenging potential preconceptions of what your museum is and what it can be. to audiences that will bring forward more visitors and customers. The key thing is as well is look at what you've got in terms of your infrastructure. So what's the situation with your Wi-Fi? What's the situation with your broadband? So where I live is particularly good, but if you go towards rural communities, you're going to have difficulties where the broadband speed isn't as good. So how will that affect the experience? Also, go to Ofcom on their website, because that will give you an indication of speed of broadband as well. So that will highlight to you a potential opportunity in respect to collaborating with the local authority on what the rollout is in respect to broadband and increasing speed, because we're going to be becoming more reliant on technology. In terms of situations with digital skills, particularly people that have difficulties in getting online, there's also collaborative opportunities with people like Age UK that support people in their over 60s, over 70s in relation to digital skills. Local libraries will sometimes have a volunteer to help people in relation to this. There's also good instructions for using Zoom and other platforms online as well. And always have a look at YouTube as well, because YouTube have got some great films in relation to good digital practice, but also in terms of how the platform works. That's the key. And then there's this. Now, this is absolutely key. If you're central or local government funded museum and you have got accompanying National Lottery Fund for Heritage projects, it is expected that you will reach WCAG 2.1 AA. The key thing is with that is in relation to the public sector bodies website mobile apps number 2 accessibility regulations 2018. There is a deadline in association to this, and it's a case of, instead of, what I don't want you guys to do is to go away and start worrying about it and 3 o'clock in the morning think, oh my God, what are we going to do about this? Now, the key thing is that if you're worried about your website and you don't know if you reach standards, give us a ring or send us an email, because we can do digital accessibility audits in relation to where you are in terms of particular standards, particularly with WCAG. And also, some of the changes that you need to do may be very slight, but we can help you with that and on your journey with that. Wouldn't you say there, Sarah? We can help them with that, can't we?
Yeah, we have an expert that works in Embed, a lovely gentleman called Matt, who does digital access audits. We're in the middle of doing quite a lot of them, given where we find ourselves. So yeah, please do get in touch. More than happy to help.
Yeah, this is it. So we don't want people to feel like they're stuck or in any way add to their already existing anxiety. This is about supporting you in respect to where you are with your website and what you need to do next. So another thing that we need to consider is the Equality Act, sections 20 to 29. Section 20 is the duty of reasonable adjustments to not place disabled people at substantial disadvantage in comparison to non-disabled people. There is also the Equality Act section 29, which means your service provision, including marketing and websites. If you provide online shopping, direct marketing or advertising via a website, then the organisation has to be an ISSP, which is Information Society Service Provider, and that has to be inclusive. But then think about your customer base. Your customer base is going to be increased if you put in inclusive practice in your online donations, but also in terms of your ticketing processes. And I know that the Arts Council Digital Culture Network is working on some guidance in relation to ticketing, which I know some colleagues are involved with, so keep an eye on that one. There's also reasonable adjustments as well for disabled and neurodivergent people. to use your website and provide services and advertising which does not discriminate against people. So that's section 29. And then you've also got the Human Rights Commission in respect to discrimination, but also in terms of the right to culture, which is the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, like that. If you don't do it right, what is the risk in terms of lack of digital inclusion? So where would we find ourselves? Well, out of everything, this is the one that I actually find really quite worrying. 9 out of 10 people won't complain about website accessibility problems. They usually turn away and they just won't engage with the business or the organisation. And that's ClickAway Pound survey from 2016. It's an interesting one. The key thing is that if you've got a third-party consultant who has designed your website, but once the budget's been spent and the project's ended, there is a business risk here that the digital project may not meet their existing platform as it's not updated, nor do the staff know what to do if it doesn't work, or there's been an update via the provider and basically it doesn't work anymore. What do? It may not reach current legislation, which you could be open to legal challenge. So what you can do and what you need to think about is any difficulties relating to WCAG 2.1 are not part of the budget or they're updated. So you've still got a budgetary and legal responsibility of getting it right. And particularly if you've got limited digital skills, you've got a problem. So it can bring risk and your leadership will be at risk in respect to this because it will be their legal obligation for putting it right. So how do you get it right? So first things first, what have you got? And the first thing is people. Who have you got in your team? Have you got anybody in your team that particularly likes using digital? Do you have people, what kind of technology do they use? Is there, what information do you need in terms of your current technology, your software? What sort of things do you have as you use for open source? What kind of equipment have you got? Have you got any decent digital recorders? Have you got, how's your phone? Is that good enough to record from? Have you got any scanners, tablets, mobiles? What's your computer like? Things like that. Start bringing together information about what you need and in terms of what you've already got. Think about your funding as well. What's the situation in respect to particular key elements that your funding stream may be interested in? Who have you got around you in terms of local organisations and agencies? You've also got us as well. So you're not alone in any of this. Where do you fit? If you're a local authority, where do you fit in the local infrastructure? So is there any existing licenses that you could use? Is it worth talking to your IT team? What's the situation in respect to future developments that could actually benefit the museum? What's the situation in regards to any technology licenses, but also in terms of website development skills? So there may be some partnership works through local social enterprises to build on those existing skills. In terms of your leadership and your advocacy, sought to identify buy-in from your leadership to give you the time and the resources to support the profile of the organisation and the things that we've been talking about already. Consider those and put those in place in terms of your leadership. So think about the stuff going on around you in regards to what we've just been talking about. Flexibility, navigation of the change that's happening. Also the situation in terms of developing advocacy within the communities. Use that to build a case in regards to your delivery. If you're using any kind of platforms, think about things such as YouTube and Vimeo. YouTube and Vimeo, I believe at the moment, do not offer audio description. So you'll need to do that yourselves. So when you talk, describe your object, like that. Think about the captioning situation in regards to that. About 80% of people who use captions are not deaf, deafened or hard of hearing. So that is a huge audience, as well as people who are deaf, deafened or hard of hearing as well. So consider that as part of your overall offer and build upon those skills. But also consider what those situations are in enabling you to have the time to be able to do this and deliver it. So it's good quality content that you can reuse, particularly if you're having to deal with local lockdown. And the key thing is, what do you need? After you've identified what you've got, what do you need? So in terms of sensory, think about your live and your closed captions. If you look at stage text do free training in terms of closed captioning, and also they'll identify with you what your live captioning could require. If you save the live captions as well, you can use them, reuse them as part of closed captions on your content. Think about things if people are colorblind. So identify by shape, not necessarily color. Think of Candy Crush. Candy Crush have different shapes, and that is specifically in identifying that people who are colorblind can't differentiate between red and the green colors on the screen. So they're the different shapes. Do you need different languages? Who can you talk to in relation to this? What's the situation with people who are translators in respect to where they are with the pandemic right now? Is that something you can do? Is that something that we need to develop that could actually be adjusted for timing? What's the situation in respect to collaborative opportunities as well to information gather in respect to this? Gather your team and your communications and your timing strategy for the project. So think about the compatibility within the existing organizational infrastructure. As I was saying earlier, think about your speed and the data for your broadband. Who do you have for your testing as well? And this is absolutely critical, because this is also enabling that time to be testing at the pre-planning, planning, and at the delivery point, and then afterwards. Ensure that if you are going to have groups involved and you are going to look at a system of payment, have a conversation with them first, because one of the key things you don't want to do right now is upset any kind of benefit system situation. So talk to them first in regards to what they're happy to do, but also in terms of the offer itself can be in relation to a cup of tea, free ticket, something like that, which I've been part of with my own group. Ensure that if you have any developers, that procurement and your tender documents have access and inclusion as part of those documents, and ensure that they are responsible for any documentation in how to use the technology, additional training, and any kind of troubleshooting. And that is absolutely key. And if you're not sure, ask. If you're going to buy any technology in relation to digital inclusion, ask them what the accessibility is for it, because some of them won't have considered it. I know it because I've asked them. So make sure that that is part of that. And that as part of your procurement, it needs to be to WCAG 2.1 AA standard. When it comes to planning and delivery as well, we haven't forgotten our guys who are potentially not going to be able to access your content in terms of digital exclusion. So think about your styles. Is there a way of delivering audio with transcription? Is there, and you can use things such as Otter and Transcribe for caption development. and also for transcribing podcasts. See whether or not you can use any tapes, any CDs, anything like that. Think about graphic novels. Graphic novels are amazing, and the key thing is you've got open source software that'll actually help you in that delivery as well. And a lot of them are photograph based as well. So if you're of a certain age, you might remember the old photo stories that you would get in things like Jackie and things like that. It's the same thing. So look at that in terms of open source software and see how you could develop a visual story using those tools like that. Also think about your sentences and your text. So don't use things like serif text like Times New Roman. It's very small, and also it's very difficult to read, particularly on screen. Think about clear, structured headings on your text and make it visual. Very difficult to read stuff off the screen. So look at also ways in which people can print it or download it. There are organizations called Recite Me and Browse Aloud, which does text-to-speech software on your website, and you can click on that and you can download MP3s from that text-to-speech content, so you can listen to it whilst you jog in or whatever. But also at the same time, it changes the background color as well. And look out for those, because I believe they've still got special offers on in relation to the pandemic to support organisations as well. With regards to the graphic novels, I've just spotted Pixton, Pixton, and Comic Strip Maker. They're open source comic software. Seriously cool. And they're great fun. So in terms of measuring success, the key thing is that this is all about desirability, viability, and feasibility in terms of your business, people needing to use your services, and also the feasibility, ensuring that your services themselves can be met with your technical infrastructure, but also in terms of your offer, like that. Oh, doing all right. What do you think, Sarah, in terms of measuring success? I always feel that technical feasibility is always a key one, particularly in terms of where people are. We have a lot of conversations sometimes about we've got to be as good as Netflix, but I'm very aware that Netflix has got a very large chunk of money behind it. I always think about keeping it simple and low cost.
I'm all for simple. I'm all for low cost where possible. We know I'm super cheap. I would say one size doesn't always fit all. And the whole point of us learning from across sectors is for us to be able to use what fits appropriately for our own particular organisation. So whether that's in our digital capability or level of digital inclusion, our policies and practices around that, the collections, the offers, however we're going to wrap that up into our plans, it's about taking those lessons and ensuring that it's really viable for your organisation. It's going to be fit for purpose for your organisation. So I wouldn't say that everything Netflix does would work in other sectors, even though they're doing, you know, some super sterling stuff. It's about taking the lessons that are going to work for you in all of this. So when we look at desirability, when we look at viability in particular, they're going to be really core elements about what it means to your particular action planning. So keeping it relevant for you.
I always think that's the key bit, is that where does it fit within your own organisation and in terms of your delivery. And also, if anybody says, why did you do that? You can actually say, this is why, and actually take them through that journey.
And it's cross sectors, and Sam's just made a great point on chat. It's, you know, learning lessons from other sectors, but absolutely from other museums. You know, go out and visit other websites, whether they're museum websites, whether they're gallery websites, whether they're other cultural organisations, whether they're other types of sectors. Just go out and see what's out there. And yeah, really great point, Sam.
And it's great fun as well, and it's a great opportunity to do it as well. just over the weekend, you think, like that one, and just make a note of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Becky's just mentioned text to speech also have add-ons to work with things like Adobe and screen readers. So again, when you're looking at the viability of your business, when you're looking at what other websites do and what other tools are available, such as the text to speech, it's again looking at how that can play into the rest of your digital offer, your digital tools and practices, such as Adobe for reading PDFs as an example. So yeah, do a little bit of research. We can help with that.
Absolutely. There's another thing as well that's just popped into my head, and that is when you're doing your audio content, think about your clarity in your voice and in your microphone. So if you're somebody who tends to talks incredibly fast when it's something really interesting, that's amazing, I do that, yes. Like that. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I can do that. There is some brilliant YouTube films for actors in how to pronounce and actually think about your tone and your speed in terms of your delivery. And if you listen to a lot of audio books like me, think about who do you like in terms of who is your person with their voice. Why do you like them and not others? And for me, sometimes it's about the speed in which they're speaking.
It's important for translation as well. So when you're using tools such as, so I speak from experience, and you will tell from this webinar, I'm quite specific in the things that I say. So I would be one of those people very guilty of getting super excited and talking really fast. When you're using tools such as Otter, which I also encourage you to go and look at, it's a translation tool for audio files. When you're using those translation tools, speaking clearly is really going to help the accuracy of the translation. So when I've used them for my podcasts, there's some strange translations on this accent. Let me tell you, when I get very excited.
This is why we always say to people, please check it. Don't assume that it's going to be perfect first time, because I've checked when I've recorded stuff and I've put it through Otter. It's hilarious. You think, I never said that. The baked beans were flying through the moon. What? You know, and literally, and there'll be other moments where I was like, that paragraph is perfect. I love it. Like that. So it's brilliant, Otter. It saves so much time. But the key thing is always check it, because it will pick up and assume. It's like auto-generated captions. It'll assume not what you, and it won't be necessarily what you think it is. Hilarious. If you want a good laugh, it's really hilarious. Right. The key thing is as well with measuring success as an organization is celebrate that success. First of all, keep that feedback, put it on the staff notice board, put it wherever you like in respect to that, because it's absolutely key, particularly if you're having a bit of a time of it. Think about the test feedback from your panels. Also in terms of review that project with the team about key learning points, key areas of development, and also specific actions from that whole process. Consider your community stakeholders' feedback, particularly in terms of their profile within the community, and also that they could be your champions as well. And consider the evaluation and the visitor numbers in relation from that key project. So how did you first hear about us? It was through the website. Or did you find the information particularly useful? What information were you particularly interested in? But also in terms of that opportunity to ensure that if there isn't a key piece of information on that website right now, that people have the opportunity to either call you or email you in respect to this. In regards to this as well, you've also got, let's see where we are, your analytics tools. So for example, Google Analytics. I was told by my husband once that if you understand Google Analytics, literally the world is your oyster, because it's quite something to get your head around. But the key thing is that with Google Analytics, and the stuff that you guys will be interested in, is what kind of device people have been using in terms of computer, tablet, mobile, what type of browser are they using, Firefox, Internet Explorer, or Google Chrome. Also, where are they using it in terms of Europe and the US? And what are the dates and times of heavy traffic? So you can see how this links to your website, but in terms of when are those key heavy traffic points and what happened as well in order to create that heavy traffic. What's your most popular pages in terms of downloadable information, activities, the colouring in sheets? What's the situation in terms of that popularity and what you want? And also, are they returning visitors to your website or are they new visitors to your website? So how is your growth happening in terms of the profile of your organisation? This is all via Google Analytics. It's brilliant bit of kit. Another thing as well, think about your social media marketing. So in terms of that, use stuff like Bitly, which is available online. Bitly is a URL shortener, but the key thing is with that, it will measure how many clicks to your website that you've had. So when it comes to your particular tweet, look at our new resources about reopening, Bitly will actually measure the amount of clicks that you have towards your website. Also, consider things like Hootsuite, which has a blog in respect to analytical tools that you can use. And also in terms of, with Hootsuite itself, it's particularly useful in regards to timed tweets. So you're not having to go straight into Twitter. And consider what platforms you need to use in regards to that. So in terms of clicks, downloads, unique visitors, you can set that all up in regards to Bitly, opportunities with organizations like Hootsuite, and also in terms of Google Analytics as well. Right, oh, we're doing all right for time. So what have we covered today? Blimey, Sarah, it's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. What we didn't want to do is literally say to you, this is what you need to consider. It's more about the journey in that consideration in regards to online digital content, and also in terms of the way things are at the moment in respect to the pandemic, in terms of potential localized lockdowns, the winter period coming up. There's a lot of stuff on the news today in regards to that. Is to enable that you're able to build on your resources and actually think about how you can have people involved, so you're not finding yourselves saying to you, you're finding yourselves in a more of a strategic planning element in terms of your own offer, and also how do you get there in terms of any particular challenges. So what we have done is given you specific key elements to think about in terms of what other sectors are doing, also in terms of what is good practice, and also in terms of key specific areas to think about in order to develop good quality inclusive content, so you're able to navigate and also be aware of people who may not be able to access your website as well.
And also just to say, for those of you who still signed on who are from the Southeast, the Southeast Museum Development Programme have just recently launched our recovery grants. So please do look on our website for that information. If you're not in the Southeast, do go and nag your own and see what they've got in the way of support and offer. But there's, you know, routinely now, there's, I'm pleased to say that more of the ACE and the Heritage Fund grants are reopening again to support people to reopen. And so actually, you know, part of reopening is becoming more digitally accessible as well. That is part of your package, and as is either Becky or Sarah, one of you said that being your second site. I think that's a brilliant idea to view that as another venue. I think that's fantastic, really useful. Great. Is that everybody okay? Got what you need, and still keep in contact with us, and can contact us via Juliet as well on the general email. Obviously, Becky and Sarah, thank you so much. It's been a lot to absorb.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Thank you
Take care, everyone.
much.